Welcome to our webinar today titled Democracy Defense Part 2, Global Activist Advice for U.S. Transition, co-hosted by Beautiful Trouble, OR Books, Blackout Collective, and Haymarket Books. We are Nonviolence International. My name is Kelly Quinn. I'm an intern at Nonviolence International. I host our Spotlights on Nonviolence series, which can be found on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/nonviolence. I'm joining you today remotely from Atlanta, Georgia. Nonviolence International is a backbone organization for the global nonviolent movement, providing fiscal sponsorship, training, and spreading knowledge and transformative stories of dynamic emerging nonviolent movements that give us hope in difficult times, and we are reshaping what we view as possible. We want to thank our co-host, Beautiful Trouble, which exists to make nonviolent revolution irresistible by providing an ever-growing suite of strategic tools and trainings that inspire movements for a more just, healthy, and equitable world. NVI's webinar series is called We Are All Part of One Another. This is a line from feminist nonviolent activist Barbara Deming. That line, we are all part of one another, is of course reflective of an ancient truth that lies at the heart of the world and religions and the scientific understanding of humans as intensely social and interdependent creatures. The purpose of this webinar is to gather advice from global activists for US residents to organize after the electoral defeat of an authoritarian leader. We also want to thank our co-sponsors, Blackout Collective, OR Books, and Haymarket Books, which promoted this event today. Now, please let me introduce our webinar host, Rafif Jouejati. She's the co-founder and director of the Foundation to Restore Equality and Education in Syria, also known as Free Syria, and the principal architect of the Syrian Freedom Charter Project, which surveyed more than 50,000 Syrians on democratic aspirations and political transition. She's someone that I've had the pleasure of getting to know quite well over the past couple of weeks, and I got to host her in one of our first Spotlights on Nonviolence videos. So without any further ado, Rafif, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Welcome everybody, and thank you all for attending today's very special session. I know you're all quite busy, but I do hope you'll be able to stay with us for the full session because this is such an important topic. Our panelists offer tremendous depth and they're contextualizing their global experiences for us. As a reminder, NVI is recording this webinar and will share it on its Nonviolence International YouTube channel. Let's review the agenda real quick. We'll introduce the panelists. Then we'll have what I am certain will be a lively discussion. We'll give our audience an opportunity to ask questions, and we'll leave time for the panelists to answer them. Finally, we'll make a few announcements and close the webinar. So to get started, for context, we're holding this conversation very soon after the highly consequential election in which US President Trump was narrowly defeated in the wake of nationwide racial justice protests led by Black Lives Matter. This was the broadest, and these have been among the broadest and most persistent protests in the history of the United States. The current president has cast doubt on the integrity of the election process and has refused to accept a peaceful transition of power. We know that his behavior resembles that of many autocratic leaders around the world. I can speak for Syria, where we've not had a transition of power to an opposing government in more than 50 years. Today, though, we know that there are proven ways to challenge autocratic behavior. Our panelists can share their wisdom when it comes to preventing executive power grabs and protecting democracy and democratic institutions. Our esteemed group of panelists will shed light on strategies and tactics that have been used effectively in other countries. I'm sure we can learn a lot from their experiences. As for me, I'll jump in with details about the Syrian experience as appropriate, as relevant, but I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists. Each panelist will speak for about 7 minutes in the order that I introduce them. I will signal a reminder when we're at the 2-minute mark. After the panelists have finished, we'll open it up for what will be an active conversation, I hope, I'm sure, on this webinar. So let me get started. Patricio Zamorano is our first speaker. He's the co-director and Spanish editor of the Council of Hemispheric Affairs. He's an international consultant in academic development and political affairs, democracy, governance, and in hemispheric relations between Latin America and the United States. Patricio is also a specialist in strategic communication, social media management, and online content development. His detailed bio outlines some of his many accomplishments. Next, we'll have Shunleiyi Thinzar from Myanmar. She brings us rich experiences, and I encourage you to read her bio. Her focus is on youth development and dialogue. She's the coordinator of Burma's National Youth Congress and the Yangon Youth Network. In 2014, she helped organize the ASEAN Youth Forum and held a highly successful UN International Youth Day celebration that reached thousands of young people and raised awareness on mental health issues. Next, we'll hear from Muhammed Bah from Gambia. Muhammed has many accomplishments, as you can see in his bio. Notably, he's an award-winning journalist and was a key coordinator on the Gambia Has Decided movement that defended the will of the people in 2016 when the former president refused to concede defeat after the elections. And last but never least, Ivan Marovic is a nonviolent organizer, a software developer, and a social innovator from Belgrade, Serbia. He's informed many other activist movements from around the world, and I can tell you that many Syrian activists are grateful for his support and trainings in the early days of the Syrian uprising. Ivan was a student organizer and one of the leaders of Otpor, a resistance movement that played a critical role in the downfall of Slobodan Milosevic in 2000. Pretty impressive bunch. So now I'm going to turn it over to Patricio and ask him to tell us about his experiences. Thank you.
Sure, thank you so much. Well, I'm surprised I am the first one, but I think there are stronger voices than me. Yes, thank you so much for the organizers. I think it's extremely necessary that we reflect on what's going on here in the United States. Not only that, I'm very excited about the link that you guys are doing, the link between experiences that we are seeing or we are experimenting in different part of the world in the so-called third world, which is not, for me, it's not the third world at all. It's just a different world, and a world that has a voice, has historic lessons that can be learned here from the US. So I'm very excited about this comparative exercise that we are trying to do coming from the South. As you know, Latin America, we are engaged in the last 2 decades in these conversations, South to South. And it's very interesting if we are doing it now South to North. So I have been told that it would be great if I can establish certain links, certain lessons from my personal experience and professional experience from Chile. I am from Chile, although don't get confused, because I don't believe that my country is the center of the world at all. I don't think it's as special as any other country. It happens that I am from there. I'm very proud of my home country, but I'm working and trying to invest my energies in the world, and I'm just trying to make sure that the underserved communities, the minority communities in any country get a very strong voice. So that's what we're doing. For example, with the Council on Hemispheric Affairs, we are doing exactly the same exercise that we are doing right now. We are doing comparative analysis, in this case, in the Americas. When I say Americas, I mean the whole continent, not only the US. America is the whole continent. It's not only this North American country. I am American as well in that sense, because I am from Chile. So I just want to say that it's very important to remind us that we have a common reality, and that starts with the language. America is all of us. We are doing this exercise trying to establish bridges of analysis between what's going on in Latin America and the US, and trying to establish bridges of communication, of constructive dialogue. Chile had a very interesting experience in the last 2 years, and I'm very inspired to say that in the US it's totally possible to have a similar experience. I'm gonna describe it. What we had in Chile 2 years ago was a situation of horrible capitalist system that was creating huge levels of inequality in this little country. Just to let you know, Chile is considered the eighth most unequal country in the whole planet, according to the World Bank. Is so unequal because rich people in Chile are extremely rich and poor people are extremely poor, and we have a very weak middle class. You are part of the middle class and something happened to your family, you have a health emergency, you lose your job, you have any issue related to your incomes, very little one, then you can be thrown to poverty very easily. So it's a society built on uncertainty. It's a society built on depression, of social oppression, on repression, and all those action that I can name. So 2 years ago, approximately, and before that, but 2 years ago especially, we have a huge social unrest process. People were just desperate. This is before the COVID-19 crisis. This is before that. Since the end of the dictatorship, at the end of the 80s, we had been living this illusion of a country, extreme capitalism. The whole education system was privatized by the dictatorship. The pension system was privatized by the dictatorship. The health sector was privatized. That was the experiment of the Chicago Boys. All of you, I'm sure, I'm very familiar with the Chicago Boys experiment in Chile. So that exploded. That exploded little by little. 2 years ago was not the first time. We have had explosions, social unrest very, very, very often. But in the last 2 years, this little tiny group of people, inspired by the Bolivarian spirit of Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, all the Bolivarian countries that started to develop since the democratic election of Hugo Chavez at the end of the 90s. All that process, it took a long time in Chile to really take place. So 2 years ago, this little group of people said, we need a new constitutional assembly. And that was huge in Chile, because Chile is a very conservative country. We don't, most of the people, the political class in Chile, they don't agree with Chavismo. They don't like Chavez. Even the Socialist Party of Chile is very anti-Chavez, which is a huge contradiction with Allende's heritage. But so we had that little group of people saying we need a new constitutional assembly. In my case, as an analyst, I thought it's impossible. I mean, in Chile, impossible that we're gonna be able to find consensus in the political class to build a new constitution, to build the will to create a new constitution. So I was very skeptic, and I thought that's not gonna happen. But actual history proved me wrong. The community from the very bottom up was able to build this momentum little by little. Don't ask me how or when, but the idea of a new constitution took root in a very strong way, and people started to believe on that. And people started to believe that that was an actual answer, because a new constitution is a very abstract thing. It's something that it's not like getting a better salary. It's not like getting healthcare. But people understood that a new constitution could break with the past, with the radical neoliberalism that we actually got from the dictatorship. So they understood we need a new system to define health as a human right, to define pensions as a human right, to define education as a human right and not as a commodity. So long story short, you knew what happened just a couple of weeks ago, where 80% of the Chilean population, after 2 years process, COVID-19, huge repression by the police forces. I'm not sure if you know, a lot of people got actually blinded. They were blinded by rubber bullets that were used by the police in Chile, a highly repressive police forces, and they injure hundreds of people. So at the end of the day, the referendum was a huge surprise even for the progressives. 80% of the population said we want a new constitution. Not only that, the second question, do you want this new constitutional assembly to be elected by the people, or you want that to be half elected by the people, half as part of actually Congress, the actual Congress that we have now? And people say, no, we want a constitution written by the actual people. So it was a huge success of grassroots organization that I have never seen in my home country since the times of Allende, right? So what is the lesson for the US? And I think I have just a couple more minutes. I think the lesson for the US is that fundamental factors to democratize this country are possible. That is a lie that we are not able to find consensus when something is good for the country, is good for the future. I would say, why we don't eliminate the electoral college? The electoral college in the US is the factor that explains why not only established voices, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, those are the only voices possible to get into power. What about the hundreds of other grassroots organizations? What about the Democrats Socialists of America? What about the Green Party that had a very great candidate? I actually work with Howie Hawkins intensely because I believe in a new voice with progressive values, real progressive values, thinking about workers of this
Time
country.
check.
And that means 1 minute?
Sure, 1 minute.
So, that's the lesson I can share with you guys regarding the Chilean experience. We need to believe that changes coming from the grassroots organizations are possible. It's a lie that the popular expression workers, LGBTQ community plus community, African Americans, Latino Americans, Latinx, all the communities, women, all the minorities. I think we have the force, we have the will, and we have the power to create change. But this country needs to believe on that. And I think we are very close after this horrible electoral crisis and institutional crisis that we are in the middle of because of Donald Trump. I think it's the best historic opportunity to create real change in the US. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Patricio. That's very inspiring, and I'm sure we could listen to you for another hour and still be fascinated. One of the things you said that resonated a lot with me was you mentioned bridges of constructive dialogue, and certainly that's what's needed at this time. But it's also a very good segue to Shunleiyi Thinzar from Myanmar. Let's hear about her experiences in promoting youth dialogue. Go ahead, Shunleiyi.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for giving me the chances, and thank you for attending, everyone. Mingalaba. This is Shunlei. So I'm tuning in from Yangon, Myanmar. So I would love to share about my my findings, like with my experiences being as an activist and youth advocate in Myanmar for over 10 years experiences. So we, on June 2nd in this year, we sent an open letter to the American people. So I drafted the letter, and we, around 20 organizations, civil society organization, endorsed the letter, and we sent it to the American embassy and also to our friends in the US, that we stand in solidarity with your struggle, that with the Blood Lives Matter especially. We are so inspired by seeing that you waited not a day to stand up against the racism and police brutality. And we share similar experiences in the country so that we can understand how this is difficult in this situation. So we send that letter to all to the people, and so we receive also a tremendous appreciation from our American friends, and we realize it is so important to stand in solidarity with each other. So I really appreciate this kind of panel that you are listening to our stories and our struggles, and we are also listening to each other. We are learning, we are growing together, and also we share the similar struggle. So as a young person living in a country like in Myanmar, you know, I grew up when I become adult, and I realized my country is being accused of genocide, a possible genocide in the Hague by the ICJ, in the ICJ, International Court of Justice. So you can imagine how it is so hard for a young person like me to live in such kind of situations. That we are so optimistic with the developments happening in the country, but still our Nobel Peace Prize winner, Aung San Suu Kyi, once a democratic icon. We voted for her, and once she are in the power or position, in the power position, then she defended the case. Under the name of national interest, national securities. So that broke our heart, that she didn't stand up with the minorities, the Rohingya population, not just the Rohingya, but also the ethnic minority in the country as well. So this is clearly broke our heart, and we been looking up to her values and icons. So things can go really wrong when somebody is in power. So that's such a big lesson for all of us, for the young generations. So this is a high time for the young generation in my country, like myself, to reevaluate, you know, how we are placing ourselves, how we position ourselves in this kind of crisis. So I want to share you kind of a slide. I prepare. So this is the picture I want to share you, that the young person in Oregon State, in the western part of the country. So they were arrested right after they expressed their feeling against the civil war, the ongoing civil war. So civil war is going on in the country, and they were immediately dragged to jail, and now they've been jailed for 7 years in prison just to peacefully protesting on the streets. So for me and for all of us, it is so important that we stand up for the right thing at the right time. It does not matter who you are, which class are you in, or how old you are. You know, we have to just stand up for the right thing at the right time. And I did the same. I was only 24 when I spoke out against the current civilian government, Aung San Suu Kyi. She was highly regarded as a kind of heroine, as well as a goddess in the country. She was highly worshipped, kind of a personal card in the country. Recently, we had elections in 2020 in November 8th, and she won landslides again in the election. Even though we have pointed out a lot about the failure that her government, her administration failed to do a lot of things, but still she won the majority of the votes, and even more than the previous term, and that's clearly set a signal that the majority in the country does not know where to stand and how to stand up for the right thing at the right time, and they stay endorse what the government is doing. So that also gave it power to her, that what she was doing is right. So it's so important for us to stand up for the right thing at the right time. I'm so glad that Americans, when we see that you were organizing a mass protest in the pandemic time, you were out on streets, you are afraid of the racism more than the virus. It's such a signal, not just for us, not just for yourself, for your generation, but also for the whole world, that we have to be reminded of the racism in various forms, because the racism mutates itself into different modernized fashion. So we have to be aware of. And you stood up at the right time for the right thing. So we also, as a young population in the country, even though we were dragged to jail, in prison, jail for 7 years. These guys were jail for 7 years in prison just to express themselves, express they don't like the civil war. But I think our generations, later generation, will never fail to do that. Will not be silenced for standing up for right there at the right time, even though we are the minority in the country. So the first thing I would love to say is, in the United States, you win the elections. That's congratulations for I want to say that. And as well in Myanmar, the majority vote for the NLD, National League for Democracy, led by the Nobel Peace Prize winner Aung San Suu Kyi. So we can see that, we can clearly see majority vote for you. But we should not forget the minorities also matter. Their voices do matter. Even though they didn't vote for you, if they didn't vote for the party you voted for, even though our other ethnic minorities didn't vote for the current ruling party, they have to make sure that they represent the all of us. The representation should be there. So this is the map I'm showing, where the election were canceled in the country. The other places where they have an election, but these ethnic minority places in the highlands, their right to vote were taken away in the previous election. So we are reminding our government that you have to represent, you have to make sure their voices are counted, even though they couldn't vote in the elections, or they didn't vote for you. So this is the thing. So in the US election, look beyond the headlines and look only at the number. We can see that 79.1 million people voted for Biden and 73.4 million voted for Trump. So they are like eligible voters are 239 million, but the Biden received only 33.1%. So the Biden, I feel like it is so important, the Biden voter, the 33.1% of Biden voters disagreed very strongly on many issues with the 30.7% of the Trump voter. But a democratic government is for all the people, even people we disagree with. We have to defend the right to differ in the democratic system. So I think it's really important that Biden also represent the 66% of those who don't vote for him, also who didn't vote in the election, which is 36.1% didn't vote in the US election. So that's the first thing. And yes. And I want to also talk about the politics of fear in the country. So political fear is everywhere around, in our homes, in our communities, and in the constitution, for example, in the laws as well. We can see it's driving from education and culture, mob mentality, military inactions, you can name it. So we have to be aware of politics of fear used by the politician and popular politician. Also, non-violent does not mean you have to be passive. So normally we take that non-violent, you have to be really passive with what's happening. I really want you to take a proactive actions, whatever happening around with you. You have to be take a step ahead of what is happening, like actually preventing what is happening. We can predict and we can also foresee what's happening after the constitutional crisis, for example, with the electoral disputes. You can foresee, you can learn from other countries, and so we have to be really proactive with what's happening. So as you've been doing, we did the same thing. We take over the street, even though there were a lot of threats from offline and online. We have to use our available freedom, even though it's very limited. I was charged and convicted for organize this protest. So you can stay protest, and so this is you can use your available freedom to do points out for those who can't. And also in this kind of pandemic, our civil space shrinking. So that's obvious, but make sure you know that we have a digital space, so we don't lose this opportunity. We have to occupy digital space with our voices and our messages. So also for the 4 points, we can't trust any government. So we have to become a watchdog. So there are many fights that we have to choose for. So I choose to fight for justice and accountability. Nobody should be above the law, even the president himself, even the president or even the state councilor herself. We are going for the time that we can sue our own presidents for what's going around with their decisions. Also, trust your instinct. This is a campaign that we organized within a night to stand in solidarity with the oppressed minority, the Muslim population in the country. The Buddhist meant handing the white roses as a solidarity. So always trust your instinct and go for it. You can organize anything. So the last point is, where are young people? We are the 60% of the global population, but still we see the vast majority of the leaders in every government are over 60 or over 70. So this is kind of sad for us that young people should have more representation in the administration, in the decision-making level. I think it's a high time for the young people to ensure you grab your chances and run for the office. So these are my suggestions, and I wish you all the best of luck with the election. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shunlei. That was a wonderful presentation, and you've said so many things that resonate. I mean, I heard standing in solidarity. I heard standing up for the right thing at the right time, and this is certainly the right time for us in the United States and really around the world. And you talked about the politics of fear. And as a Syrian American, I can identify. I just want to put in a little plug for the Syrian activists who in northern Syria, in Idlib, under fear of bombardment with the Russian warplanes, held up signs saying, "I can't breathe," in support of George Floyd. And so it just goes back to our theme of how we are all part of one another. Thank you so much for that. Since we're talking about transition and authoritarians who will not step down, let's turn to Muhammed Bah to tell us about his experience in the Gambia, please. Muhammad, I will give you a time check, 2 minutes in, okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the floor. I am very much grateful to also be part of this panel. I think it's important to also share some of the experience, notwithstanding, as you know, Gambia is one of the smallest countries in West Africa, and with a population over a bit of 2 million. And Gambia, since independence 1965, has never experienced a change of government through elections, democratic way of change of government, because the first government came, after the British rule, which was the first usher in the First Republic, and then the other government that came was a military regime that took over from the First Republic unlawfully, and then they led a transition, that is a 2-year transition, and then they even promised to give back to a civilian rule, but that was not the case. And since they came into power, the government started ruling people with an iron fist for 22 years. When you go to work, you are fearful of being whisked away. A lot of people, you can hear, if you're following our transition, the TRRC, the Truth and Reconciliation and Reparation Commission, a lot of revelations has been made where family members, were whisked away, people died, people were killed, women, children, and then the economy went down. So in 2016, which we call the golden year, which was an year where Gambia, for the first time since 1965, we can say, or when we became a republic in 1970, has never experienced changing a government through a ballot box. And this was a golden opportunity. Prior to the elections, what civil society, and one thing I want the American people to learn is to build a synergy, a coalition of civil society, building a synergy. I know there are a lot of civil society organizations that are doing wonderful job, but when it comes to in terms of crisis, I think it's important to build that synergy, build that togetherness as Americans, and then come up with better strategies as to how you approach the thing. Yeah, that is what we did as Gambian civil society, because a lot of people were doing a lot of things. But what we did in 2016 prior to the elections, we know that it's now or never, because a lot of attempted coups has been made. It was unsuccessful. So we had to use this opportunity democratically to ensure that this government is out. What we did is to demystify or to change people's perception, because people were believing that it will never happen. This man is a powerful man. He has the guns. He killed people. And people even think that if you don't vote for the man, he will know, and the next minute you disappear from the earth, because if you disappear, then it's over. No one sees you. So, but we try to make a synergy around that, coalition, building a strong coalition of civil society and young people as well, to look at our strength and then the opportunities we have, as well as the threats and weaknesses. And then each organization has a strength, and then like those that are very good in communication went to the radios, those that are good in design billboards, and then also we make sure that all the messages are the same. That is unifying people, letting people to know, to believe themselves, to know the Constitution, their fundamental right, and know that sovereignty lies in the hands of the people. Sovereignty lies in the hands of the people. So when we did that, it was successful. The turnout during the elections was great. And then after the elections, Jammeh, the dictator, said he was defeated in just few days, because we did not trust what he said, because we know the kind of person he was. And later he said he is not going anywhere. And what he started doing, he started bringing his loyalists, that is in the military. He started giving them higher ranks and demoting other soldiers that he don't trust. So when we were expecting a transition. So what we did as Gambians as well, we said, after all the energy, this is the time we should stand for our country, because the people have already decided, and then we should not let the will of the people to perish. So I think that is the time everyone comes in solidarity to ensure that the people's vote are defended. So better still, we came together as a civil society, did that togetherness, and then we also identify some of the key messages. What we did was, we did a mass movement building synergy. As I said, we identify some of the people that are interested and some of the individual Gambians. And then we started a massive online campaign. We know that Gambians are more active on Facebook. We decided to have a hashtag called Gambia, hashtag Gambia has decided. Hashtag Gambia has decided. And then people were also divided in political lines. We've seen the president's ethnic group, which is a minority, was definitely an ethnic group which was also the one enjoying during Jammeh's time. And now those ethnic group, the Jolas, they feel that, wow, our man has gone, and then now we are not part of the society. So we will defend the president to ensure that that is the incumbent, to ensure that there is no transition. So what we did was we also created, that avenue where we dialogue with those people to let them know that Gambia is bigger than an individual. Gambia is bigger than Yaya Jammeh. Yaya Jammeh alone should not be allowed to, to bring a problem in the Gambia, to bring war, because he was positioning some of the military personnel all over in strategic positions, like as if Gambia was a war zone. We've seen a lot of people were scared, and then we wanted to go out to protest, but it would have been detrimental. So we said, let's strategize. So I believe it is important that you strategize and then intensify your online campaign and use the billboard. The billboard was very important because it brings relief, because people were like, wow, this man is powerful. How can we get this man out? We cannot go out because everywhere weapons, everywhere military personnel. If we go out, he can kill, he don't care. So we said, okay, now let's erect this billboard. And then with the message, like Gambia has decided, one people, one nation, and then we need a new Gambia. And then people started embracing that. And later we say, okay, what can we do? We later print out t-shirts. T-shirts that Gambia has decided, one people, you can see Gambia has decided at the back, you see one people, one nation. And then we've seen now everyone was like, yeah, this is the reality. We have to ensure that we defend this uh, this votes. I'm sorry. Let me just.
And Muhammad, it's a good opportunity for me to give you a time check. You don't have much time. But
Yeah,
we'll give you time for the
I'm
siren.
sorry. Yeah, I'm not far from the roadside, so yeah. Okay. I definitely urge, because I would have loved to discuss on certain issues, but hence we don't have time. So another issue is we had a youth convergence, because Gambia, 64% of the population is constituted by the young people. What we did was we had a youth convergence, and you can see these billboards were removed by military officers. I don't just want to dilate on it. You can see on the screen, you can read as we go. And what happened was we organized a youth convergence, because we know that the country was divided in political lines, in tribal lines, and then we make sure that, because young people were more vulnerable. We've seen young people attacking each other, and then going too far, creating violence. And this youth convergence saved a very important role in the new Gambia. Whilst Jammeh was here, Jammeh was there, we called all the young people, at least representative of young people from all the 7 regions within the Gambia. We discussed the way forward, and then told them how important this defending this the people's will, how important. And then we also made a strategic, like we strategized to ensure that if they go back to their communities, they also create those platforms to discuss these issues, and then also make a campaign, online campaign. You can see, I would have loved to share other slides where you see young people. Yeah, you can see the online campaign. Young people young people using papers where they design, Gambia has decided, please allow the new president-elect to come on board. So these are the mechanisms. So I believe it is important to ensure that you come together as Americans, and then let the incumbent know that it is important, because America is bigger than him alone, is something that you have to inculcate in yourself, and also show the man that Donald Trump, this is definitely what is happening. You intensify your campaign. You can even protest peacefully, but I know COVID-19, and I'm very sorry that the US has almost more than 10 million people We are very sorry for that. And then we are in solidarity with the US people. And then we're hoping that you have a smooth transition, but you have to defend the will of the people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Muhammad. That was really inspiring. Your idea to build solidarity around a coalition of civil society organizations is an excellent one. I'm sure hopefully that's happening in the United States. I also love the statement that sovereignty lies in the hands of the people, and this is something that people around the world can be inspired by, particularly those who live in authoritarian states. The social media campaign of Gambia Has Decided is absolutely brilliant. And I wonder, Yvonne, if you did anything similar under different circumstances. Tell us about when Serbia decided, please, and your experiences there.
Thank you. Thank you, Rafif. Yes, I do remember that. It was a long time ago, but I kind of often speak about that particular moment where, you know, the whole population of the country managed to force Milosevic, the guy who was known for initiating and participating and worsening 4 wars and the breakup of Yugoslavia, was responsible for numerous political assassinations inside the country, including his predecessor, the guy who was the president before him was murdered by Milosevic, and many other figures. But he stepped down without a single shot fired. It was like a very, very important victory for us, especially looking at the kind of history of the country and the regions, which is very violent. But you know, what I often talk about is that, you know, we need to understand that dictators are usually the agents of chaos, and we think of dictatorship as like the strict, rigid force, but dictators usually use chaos and promote chaos and destabilize the country in order to get their kind of force as the only solution and to kind of assert themselves. And so, although I kind of often talk about it, I would like to introduce one more thing and use Serbia as a case study for that. And that is, when we talk about authoritarians, we sometimes focus too much on the authoritarian leaders, but actually the key is in the authoritarian followers. And the authoritarian followers and people who actually would trade their freedom, would trade their democracy, would trade peace, would trade stability for a firm hand. And it may look like a paradox, but it was the reason why Milosevic managed to come to power, why he managed to devastate our country so much. And even to this day, the ghosts of that style of politics still linger, and they still haunt the country and prevent us from kind of making a fresh start. So, you know, it was when I was growing up, I was very young when this was happening, and when this mobilization, the nationalist mobilization, was happening in Serbia and doomed the country. And actually, what we managed to do as Otpor was actually to marginalize this political force to the extent where we could move forward. But this force was based on like numerous grievances that people had. It was the majority of population, the ethnic Serbs in Serbia, had many grievances. The grievances were mainly a result of a decline, political decline in Yugoslavia as a political force, as a demographic decline, economic decline to others, and this feeling that, you know, victorious in 2 world wars, a small nation that defeated the Ottoman Empire, that defeated the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but now all these others were getting all the benefits, and the Serbs are being screwed over. And Milosevic came, and he actually was somebody who exploited those grievances. And people were willing to follow him despite all his failings, despite the fact that he actually ruined the economy, that he brought misery to the whole country, that he started wars, but they kept following him because he was he recognized those grievances as he was playing those grievances. He had a loyal following. It wasn't the majority, but it was a significant and very, very motivated minority willing to do whatever. And they didn't care about norms. They didn't care about any kind of rules or laws. That was the most important thing. So although we mobilized on our side and we had our own, let's say, constituency, mostly around like young people, students, but also professionals, people who were in the cities mostly, who were better educated, who were better off. Our mobilization alone was only part of the equation, one part of the equation. The other part was actually we needed to kind of work on those who were followers of Milosevic and his policy. We needed to neutralize these kind of poisonous effect of this ideology and this propaganda that was being spread by him and his regime. And only after several years, when we managed to actually neutralize this effect, that our mobilization actually managed to succeed, because we were always afraid that even if we mobilize, even if we have the numbers on our side, that on the other side, we're going to have equally motivated group that is going to do anything to stay in power. And that is going to be a recipe for disaster. So we needed to kind of create this move towards them. And the way we did it, and it was a very long process, it took several years, and it was never completed. As I said, to this day, these ghosts are still haunting Serbia. But it had one very important element, that it was exposing this ideology as a front to actually rip people off. And we were looking for examples where it was even like a kind of a slope, while you guys are watching to see what are going to be the borders of Serbia and where the front is going to move in the war, somebody is reaching into your pocket. That's the whole idea behind it. The ideology of nationalism was being used to rip people off. And the most loyal followers were the ones who were being ripped off by the regime. So exposing this kind of connection between nationalists and corruptions, corrupt officials, war profiteers, and others who were involved in that was very important. Another thing that was very important was to kind of offer other ways for people to voice those grievances, and especially the grievances that had to deal with identity, and the grievances that people had around identity. We tried to kind of shift in the form of like constructive, patriotic citizens kind of involvement, and this is hence our most kind of popular slogan at the time: resistance because I love Serbia. So in a sense that, like, if you are a patriot, if you are somebody who loves the country, you have to resist the regime that is actually ruining it. Because despite all the kind of and nationalistic fervor, were ruining the country. So in a sense, that was how we kind of exposed the folly of that nationalist ideology and neutralized. So when neutralized those forces, so when the climax happened on October 5th, 2000, and when, you know, like 1 million people descended on Belgrade defending their vote, that was being kind of, when the elections were actually, their electoral will was being undermined, the other side already knew that they lost. They not just that they lost, but that there was not worth fighting and defending Milosevic and his regime, because they really, that he lost that appeal, and he wasn't seen anymore as a champion for that cause that he actually so successfully manipulated for such a long time. So I guess my bottom line here, and this is where I will end, is that, you know, we need to mobilize on our side, but we need to think about the other side, and that other side is often a victim of serious manipulation, serious propaganda, serious operation. And then, you know, they do have certain grievances that, you know, may be real, may be imagined, but they are there. And as long as, you know, we don't figure out how to move them away from the kind of these forces of nationalist, promoting a nationalist ideology, it's going to be difficult to fix the problem. Yeah, that's that's kind of in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. That was also very, everybody's so inspiring. But one thing that particularly resonated for me was the concept of the authoritarian followers, because we're certainly seeing a lot of that in the United States with the people who are so blindly loyal to Trump. And of course, we see that with other regimes. And of course, you mentioned the poisonous effect, and we're seeing that toxicity in the United States. And so hopefully through your guidance and that of our other panelists, those of us in the States and those Americans abroad can make a difference and start organizing a little bit better, I guess, or more effectively. I would like to ask everybody to join me in a round of applause for our panel. Really inspiring, really wonderful to hear from you all and to learn from your experiences. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions. I hope we're going to have a lot of questions. And so let's see if we have any questions. Let's start with Patricio for now. Any questions for Patricio and his experiences in Chile, please?
And I'll just add, people can feel free to type questions into the chat directly, and we'll try to honor them, as well as raising your hand. If you go, you can raise your hand in the participant list or the reaction list, and we'll try to call on you, and then you can unmute and ask your question. Feel free to type questions for anyone, since we have such a little bit of time, and we'll try to honor all of them. And if we want to start with questions for Patricio, that's great, but feel free to type in the chat or raise your hand with the hand up button that you can find on your computer on the bottom in the participant list. Thanks so much. Back to you, Rafif.
Thanks, Nadine. And I will ask for help in seeing who's raising their hand and who's typing questions. We do have a question for Yvonne. So let's go ahead. So Carol's asking, how did you reach out to authoritarian followers on a personal basis, through social media, all of the above? And Yvonne, while you prepare your answer, I'm going to ask Patricio a question that comes from Ray, because she was very inspired by the No campaign and the use of positive visionary messaging. So the question is, could you comment about that and share any wisdom for marketing and messaging here in the US? Thank you, Ray. Patricio, to you.
Okay, I thought that Ivan was first.
No, he's preparing his answer.
Sure. So let me improvise immediately then. Yeah, I mean, the No campaign was very inspiring. I was lucky to be a child during that campaign, so I witnessed the spirit of we had there. I would say that it is very important to create first of all, a sense of common goal that the No campaign was able to inspire by beautiful things. That No campaign, and I know that the movie is very good on that. It was also an artistic approach to the dictatorship, because at that time the question was, okay, we need to denounce the darkness, right? Everything that the dictatorship was actually doing, harming people, torturing people, disappearing people, raping women, exiling people. It was so much victims, so much baggage in terms of human rights violations that the genius aspect of this campaign, and it was very polemic at that time, and the movie is very clear about that. The debate was, okay, we highlight that people are actually suffering now, or we acknowledge that, but we try to create a new future, a more positive future. And that was very polemic. I don't agree with 100% what was done, but because I believe that the pain of the victims was so sacred, so horrible, that you had to honor that somehow. And the campaign did that. The campaign actually did that in a daily basis. But at the same time, they were trying to develop this message of okay, we need to look into the future, and a good way to defeat darkness, to defeat the horrible dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet, is to create a campaign with a positive message. I don't think that that's gonna work in every single society. I can tell you though that communication and strategic communications, I'm a professor on those issues, and I can tell you that it could be used for bad things as well. Donald Trump is a genius of strategic communications. He uses Twitter and the TV in general on his advantage for negative values, because in his case he's doing exactly the same. He's using communications as well, but to enforce bigotry, racism, hatred to women, minorities, talking badly about immigrants like Mexicans, right? They are criminals and whatever he said. So it is a double-edged sword in that sense. So what I believe though, and I want to highlight this to end this answer, in the Chilean case, we have 80% of the population actually voted for the new constitution. When we have in Chile is 35 hardcore votes for the right-wing political parties, and maybe 25% hardcore vote for Pinochet. Still, believe it or not, we still have people who will vote for Pinochet. But that 80% of support to a new constitution to destroy the military heritage of Pinochet, within that 80%, we have a lot of people who are right-wing, who are conservative, who don't believe in democracy for the good of everyone. So in that case, I can tell you that if we do a reform movement in the United States to improve democracy here, eliminate the Electoral College, eliminate the restrictions for independent political parties to register in every single state, we eliminate the restrictions for voting rights, which is amazing. We still have voting suppression in the US in the 21st century, especially against African Americans, especially against Latinx people. So any campaign that we do, I think it needs to inspire people who are not necessarily progressive. If we deliver the right message, we are looking for the democratization of the whole society as a whole for the good of everyone. I think the elimination of the Electoral College is a very good cause, that if you are able to shape that argument, that narrative in a very rational way, meaning we need to democratize the access to Congress. We need to democratize the access to the presidency. One person, one vote, as simple as that. Those messages are simple enough, and the No campaign had those messages.
Patricio, I'm going to use this opportunity to segue to a couple of questions. We have questions from Midge and Carol around neutralizing or reaching authoritarian followers. And so really the questions are, how did you do that in Serbia? And what do you suggest from Trump followers? And I know these are going to be popular questions and your answers are very popular, but we've got quite a list of questions. So I'm going to ask you to be reasonably brief, please. Thank you. Please go ahead, Ivan.
I can be totally brief. So first, the thing is that, kind of we need to understand that it's kind of there is like a psychological underpinning of the that's kind of the motor, So like, this is no like in our case, it's not a coincidence that like most of these people were like men in their midlife crisis. They also lost their jobs because they worked in the kind of big companies that were kind of losing kind of economically, and they spoke Serbo-Croatian, and all the minorities spoke Serbo-Croatian as well, but they also had a different language they could communicate to. And if you speak Serbo-Croatian, that's the only language you speak, and they understand what you're saying, but you don't understand what they're saying. There's a sense of insecurity. So these are all these things that you can actually understand, like where these grievances are coming from. But the point is not to explain that. The point is to offer them a sense of community and a way out, because that sense of that insecurity can only be healed with belonging. So we need to create a new place for them to belong, and the people who offer them that new place were their children and their grandchildren. So this is why the youth movement was the most important part of the whole thing, because the youth could penetrate the walls of nationalism. Because what fights we had at our dinner tables, the equivalent of Thanksgiving, which was the Serbian Slava, which is the traditional where families get together. What fights we had at the dinner table between parents and their children. But this is where the weakness of that ideology, and this is how we broke it. Was it brief?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ivan. Now we've got a great comment/question from Kayla Starr, who says, for 40 years now, I've exposed only using nonviolence as our tactic in the US. Now, with the specter of armed white supremacists ready to keep Trump in office, Kayla's wondering if we will need to arm ourselves or prepare for the use of force. And I'd like to give Shunleiyi an opportunity to give her perspective on that, please. Shunleiyi, can you hear us?
Yes, that's what happened with the young people, young student in 1988 after the uprisings that the military, they shut down to many people. Civilians were killed in the uprisings, and then the students, they formed the first ever student-led army, in the border area in Thailand. So I believe that we have a right to defend ourselves. We have the right to defend our values. That's what happening in Myanmar, that we have many different ethnic groups. For me, growing up from the majority groups, I don't understand why people hold up against, and fight against. This is violent. That's what we see this is. But now I started to realize there are many cases, there are a lot of oppression, systemic oppression, structural oppression, that they have to defend themselves with their guns. They have to push back, and then they demand political change. So that's what's happening. And the majority didn't understand that. That's what happened with the ongoing cycle. But we have to be aware that the majority, the oppressive regime might create a lot of device and rule strategies amongst the ethnic minorities, among the ethnic racial races. So this is really important, that why in Myanmar we don't have that peace process yet. The main reason is that the ethnic groups in the country, even though they are fighting for their own right, but they can't unite themselves. as the majority, kind of forces to fight against the main military. So they are fighting each other as well, and there were a lot of different causes that instigate the hatred among the intra ethnic tension among them. So it's really important for the ethnic minority in any society to be united, be aware of all these politics of fear used by the politicians, by the leaders, so that whatever you are holding guns or not holding guns, if you are united, then I think is a best way for you to go forward. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And now I know that Beth and Isvara would like to ask questions. So Beth and Isvara, I'm going to ask you to briefly state your questions. Beth first, and then we will turn to, let's see if Muhammad would like to take one or both of the questions. Go ahead, Beth. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, and apologies for, I'm driving at the same time, so apologies for that background noise. So I'm Beth, I'm an Ethiopian American activist and organizer in DC area, and what really stood out to me in some of the, and want to get some wisdom is, because I'm bicultural and I grew up in America within another culture within the country, I think a lot of the concerns that I'm seeing as an organizer is that there are so many bicultural individuals that, I'm trying to get to the base of it. So our country is very much rooted in a horrible history of slavery that, highlights above anything else kind of like the continuation of white supremacy, and that's kind of what the Trump supporters kind of highlight, right? And so it's really difficult to try to align everybody because of that. We're a country of immigrants, right? It's a positive that we're melting, it's a melting pot, but it also kind of continues with the divide because we're all different cultures, we're all different languages. And so I just want some experiences. I know we've talked about different ethnic cultures within a community, within a country, but they're still kind of like countrymen, right? I'm Chilean, I'm Ethiopian, right? And with America being such a melting pot and it being such a people feeling not connected to the issues of people on the ground, what are some suggestions or advice that could be given on uniting on that front and strengthening those numbers, and also uniting, how do we also talk to the other side with that in mind, right? With so many different cultures, so many different countries in America, how do we then reach out to Trump or create that, how Yvonne was sharing, how you have to reach out to the other side, knowing that context as well.
That's great, Beth. Thank you so much. So Muhammad, I'm going to ask you to ponder that question, especially because you talked about building solidarity and coalitions of civil society organizations. And let's turn to Isvara. Please introduce yourself and then go ahead and state your question briefly.
I'm originally from Chile. I've been in this country for almost 60 years. I worked in the Allende campaign before I could vote. I could not vote for him because by the time he was elected president, I was in this country. And I want people to address the problem of the economic model. Chile was the example for the neoliberal, the free market economy, and it completely destroyed the socialist plan that we wanted to have when we chose Allende. And I know here, so that's what I would like to see. What is the opinion of this brutal capitalism that we are living and this international corporate control of a world that is going on now? That's my question. Thank you.
A really good question. And so who would like to take that one? Before we get to Isvara's question, Muhammad, we go back to Beth's question, which centered around how do you unite people from different backgrounds and cultures and organize them into something more of a solidarity movement?
Okay, thank you for that question. I would like to try to also give a background, Gambian context. Gambia has more than, we can say, more than 10 to 20 ethnic groups. And then people were obviously divided in these ethnic lines because of politics. Politicians, what they do, they will use ethnic sentiments to divide others, like bring divisions just to get political scores. So in the context, what we've been doing in our advocacy is, I think it's important to use various local means. I don't know if it will work in the American context, but what we did was, first we had what we call a dialogue. We call it a national, serious national dialogue. It's called a serious national dialogue, or asking ourselves, where are we and where do we want to see ourselves as Gambia? You understand? And those are kind of recommended. And then people honestly speaks about the ethnic differences, because we've seen even violence occur because of ethnic sentiments just after the elections. Mandinkas versus Jolas, that is the biggest versus the minority. And sometimes it was fatal, you know. We've seen a lot of instances. But how can we discuss? I think sometimes it's because of we don't have serious platforms where we discuss these issues. And another issue that can be used are radios. I don't know how it works, but Gambia radio, using radio stations works. You discuss about how can we see ourselves as Gambians. How can we also respect our fundamental human rights or fundamental rights as enshrined in the Constitution? Whereas the Constitution states that, you know, Gambia is a multi-party democracy. Gambia have people are there having freedom of speech, expression, freedom of belief, consent, and all those things we advocate, but we have to come together first to see what kind of languages are we going to even bring those people that are divided based on tribal lines. We bring them on the same platform. We discuss as citizens of Gambians. I think it's important. And sometimes we call what we call bantaba discussion. Like we go under a tree, the elders used to go under a tree, whatever they used to discuss seriously, they go under a tree called bantaba. So we call those kind of discussions bantaba. So you have to look at your local context. What can work? What can work? You have to discuss seriously, honest discussions, and then you have to create those platforms to ensure that these things are definitely done. I think I want to also say, I don't know if I have time, neutralizing.
Not really.
Yes.
Super quick.
Yeah. Neutralizing Trump followers. What we did as Gambia, we read to the families of those people that are supporting blindly, and they are technocrats, but they are supporting blindly the incumbent, which was injustice. And then we reach out to the families of those. And then, women have powers. You reach out to their wives, tell them, the consequences, and then how Trump is undermining, and how their husbands, how their wives, how the people are supporting, and reach out to their sons and daughters. Tell them frankly, discuss with them, and then they can put pressure on them. What we did, we went to the ministers, and we went to some of these technocrats. We went to their families, talked to them how this can affect our country, how this can undermine our country. We know America is one of the best countries, as we say, quote unquote. So if people are looking up to America as one of the best democratic states, how can this undermine? So these are the things that you have to look. And then later ministers started resigning They started resigning from office. The pressure was on their families, on them. So these are tactics that you can use. You can also involve family members, you know, to ensure that.
Thank you so much, Muhammad. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll see some members of Congress resigning. I would like to get Isvar's question answered very quickly, and we're running out of time. We do have some announcements, so a quick answer. Ivan, would you like to take that?
Oh my God, even I wasn't born then. And I'm putting one of the oldest on the panel. So I have to say, you know, there is like the economic underlying, and you know, the how shall I say, and I kind of pointed to it a little bit when I said that when there is nationalism, there is a ripoff happening, because you know it is being used. This ideology, which is very toxic, is being used to kind of cover up some sort of transfer of wealth that is happening. And this is certainly like the kind of why it is lucrative to do, because nobody would invest in such an ideology if it doesn't have any, if it doesn't produce that sort of profit, you know. So in a sense, I think that is, you know, but I would like just one thing of what Beth said, you know, when she said, you know, no matter what, we are still kind of, despite ethnic differences, we're still seen as part of one country. Yeah, that was the case in Yugoslavia. Despite all the ethnic differences, we were all Yugoslavs, but we're not anymore. And that means that we should never underestimate that if, it's not that they're very strong and powerful and smart, but if these people are left alone, if we don't fight them back, they will ruin anything. So we need to be vigilant.
Thank you so much, Ivan. And I would just like to say a couple of words before I turn it over to Nadine to close. I find that everybody has been so inspiring, the speakers, as well as those posing the questions. What it tells me is that we really do have a common humanity. It tells me that our activism bridges cultures and generations. And we see that people power really can be effective. So I would say, let's all keep the faith. Let's all keep fighting nonviolently. Let's keep up the energy, and let's go make change. Let's go make a difference. So thank you, speakers. Thank you, attendees. Another silent applause real quick. And Nadine, I turn it over to you, and thank you so much.
Oh, this was really inspirational. I thank all of our speakers from across the globe in so many different time zones. And I really look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thank you, Rafif, for the moderation. And while we're on it, thanks to Nonviolence International, of course, the beautiful Trouble collection of folks of which I'm part, and folks who help get the information out, including Haymarket Books, OR Books, and Blackout Collective. I've posted in the chat, and maybe Woojin, also special thanks to you for helping us manage this technically. And if you could post the last slide with links to everything that's also in the chat. We also offer Beautiful Trouble and Blackout, a joint venture called the Resistance Hotline, for those of you looking to do more actions in your own locations and trainings. We offer support in an old-fashioned, new version of an old-fashioned 1-800 line. It's 1-844-NVDA now. You can actually call us up or go to the website. So we're really, really glad to have this information start us thinking and acting right now in this post-election season in the United States. I think the big lessons that we have to take away, as Yvonne said, are to be vigilant. And as I think Muhammad and Shunleiyi mentioned, we have to keep engaged and keep an eye on the bigger picture that Patricio mentioned about big changes that we need to do. I love the concept of the leadership of the youth and newly engaged folks who are driving our understanding of the work that has to happen and offering a way for those who have come before us to move with us into the future through the pandemic and through the multiple pandemics that we face of COVID, of racism, of the infodemic of fake news and hatred that we must combat to move us forward. So again, thank you everyone for all this. Please check out and support all of the hosts and sponsors. And we look forward to seeing you in the streets, in reality and metaphysically, in the digital streets. And please do continue to connect with each other, build the groups that we need, and build community and people power for the long haul. And it's 1:30. We're going to unmute, and everyone can again say goodbye and have a good evening, have a good day.